life. The designer suits, the perfect children in coordinated outfits, the gleaming corporate towers that touch the sky. But what if I told you that behind every polished family business empire lies a truth so devastating that it would make you question everything you've ever believed about success? Stay with me until the end, because what I'm about to reveal will change the way you see every powerful family you've ever admired. The Ashford family stood in the center of their company's headquarters, surrounded by hundreds of employees who had gathered for what was supposed to be a celebration. Marcus Ashford, the CEO, stood tall in his tailored navy suit, his wife Victoria beside him in an elegant cream dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. But it was the children who drew everyone's attention. 4 perfectly dressed kids, 2 boys in matching blue blazers and 2 girls in coordinated pink jackets, holding hands as they faced the crowd. To the outside world, this was the picture of dynasty. This was what winning looked like. This was the American dream in its most beautiful form. But Sarah Mitchell knew better. She had been Marcus Ashford's executive assistant for 7 years, and she had seen what happened behind the closed doors of conference rooms and private offices. She stood at the back of the crowd now, her stomach churning as she watched the scene unfold. The red arrow that someone had digitally added to the photo later, the one pointing directly at Victoria, would become infamous across social media. People thought they were pointing out her fashion, her poise, her perfection. They had no idea they were pointing at the woman who was about to bring an entire empire crashing down. 3 months earlier, Sarah had been filing expense reports when she noticed something odd. Small discrepancies at first, nothing that would raise immediate alarm. A few $1,000s here, a private jet charter there that didn't match the executive calendar. She had worked in corporate finance long enough to know that wealthy people had complicated lives, and not everything needed to make perfect sense to someone at her level. But Sarah had also worked long enough to know when something felt wrong, and this felt very, very wrong. The Ashford Empire, as the media loved to call it, had been built over 3 generations. Marcus's grandfather had started with a single manufacturing plant in Ohio. His father had expanded into real estate and technology. Marcus himself had taken the company global, with offices in 23 countries and over 15,000 employees worldwide. The business magazines loved him. He was the perfect modern CEO, the man who talked about work-life balance while posting pictures of his kids visiting the office. He was the executive who preached family values while building a billion-dollar empire. He was, by every measurable standard, winning at life. Victoria Ashford had her own story that the media adored. She wasn't just a CEO's wife who lunched and shopped. She had her own venture capital firm, investing in women-led startups and speaking at conferences about female empowerment in business. She wrote articles about raising children while building companies. She was on the boards of 3 charitable foundations. She was, in every photograph, every interview, every public appearance, absolutely perfect. Their children were being groomed for greatness from birth. The oldest, Charlotte, was only 8 but already spoke 3 languages and played violin at a competition level. The 7-year-old twins, Mason and Madison, were both enrolled in an exclusive academy that cost more per year than most families earned. The youngest, little Emma at just 5 years old, had already appeared in a documentary about childhood development and exceptional early learning. They were the golden children of a golden family, living a golden life. Sarah had believed in all of it. She had admired Marcus, respected Victoria, and even felt a strange sense of pride in working for a family that seemed to represent the best of what ambition and hard work could achieve. She had defended them at dinner parties when friends made cynical comments about wealthy families. She had argued with her own sister who insisted that nobody got that rich without cutting corners and hurting people. Sarah had been a true believer. Until she found the second set of books. It happened by accident, the way these things often do. Sarah had been asked to retrieve some files from Marcus's home office while he was traveling overseas. Victoria had given her the security codes and told her exactly where to look. But Sarah had grabbed the wrong leather portfolio, one that looked identical to the one she was supposed to take. She didn't open it until she was back in her car, and when she did, her hands started shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. The documents inside detailed a complex network of shell companies, offshore accounts, and what appeared to be a massive tax evasion scheme spanning multiple countries. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the evidence of systematic wage theft from the company's lowest-paid workers, the factory employees and cleaning staff and warehouse workers who made the empire run. While Marcus posted on social media about fair wages and worker dignity, his company was using loopholes and intimidation tactics to deny overtime pay, benefits, and even basic safety equipment. The numbers were staggering. Over the past 5 years, the scheme had redirected nearly $50 million that should have gone to workers into private family accounts. Sarah sat in her car in the Ashford's circular driveway, surrounded by manicured gardens and marble fountains, and felt physically ill. She thought about the single mother who worked in the company's packaging facility, the one who had asked Sarah for advice about applying for food assistance because her paycheck never seemed to stretch far enough. She thought about the maintenance worker who had been injured on the job and then fired before he could claim workers' compensation. She thought about all the families struggling while the Ashfords posed for magazine covers about their perfect life. She should have gone to the authorities immediately. That's what heroes do in movies, right? They see injustice and they act. But Sarah wasn't in a movie. She was a 32-year-old woman with student loans and a sick mother who depended on her insurance. She was someone who had worked incredibly hard to get where she was, and who knew that whistleblowers rarely lived happily ever after. So she made copies of everything, returned the original portfolio to exactly where she'd found it, and spent 3 sleepless weeks trying to decide what to do. The decision was made for her when she overheard a conversation she wasn't supposed to hear. Marcus was on a video call in his office, and Sarah had been delivering papers that needed signing. He waved her in without ending the call, the way he often did, treating her like furniture that didn't have ears. The voice on the other end was talking about a factory inspection that was scheduled for the following month. Marcus laughed, actually laughed, and said not to worry. He knew which inspectors could be bought and which politicians owed him favors. The safety violations would disappear long before anyone official showed up. And if any workers complained, well, there were always more desperate people who needed jobs. Sarah set down the papers, left the office, went to the bathroom, and threw up. Then she called a lawyer. Then she called a journalist. Then she prepared for her entire life to explode. The day the story broke, Sarah was already gone. She had resigned from her position, citing family reasons, and had moved to stay with her cousin in another state. She watched from afar as the news coverage began, as federal investigators raided Ashford Empire offices in 6 cities simultaneously, as Marcus and Victoria were led out of their home in handcuffs while their children watched from the windows. She saw the photographs that went viral, including that one from the company celebration, the one with Victoria looking so poised and perfect. The red arrow that appeared in countless social media posts seemed to point accusingly at a woman who had built her entire brand on empowerment while profiting from exploitation. The investigation revealed even more than Sarah had uncovered. Victoria's venture capital firm had been using investment money to fund the family's personal expenses and then claiming business losses on taxes. The charitable foundations were largely fake, with most donated money cycling back to family-controlled entities. The children's expensive schools and tutors and opportunities were being paid for with money stolen from workers who couldn't afford basic necessities. Even the perfect family photographs were calculated image management, designed to make the Ashfords seem relatable and aspirational while hiding the rot underneath. The legal proceedings took months. Marcus and Victoria both faced multiple felony charges. The company was forced into bankruptcy, putting thousands of people out of work. The ripple effects devastated entire communities that had depended on Ashford facilities for employment. Sarah received death threats from people who blamed her for the job losses, as if she had somehow caused the problem rather than exposing it. She also received messages of gratitude from former workers who finally understood why they had struggled so much while making wealthy people wealthier. The truth about family business empires, the truth nobody wants to discuss at cocktail parties or write about in business magazines, is that they are often built on a foundation of exploitation that gets passed down through generations like genetic inheritance. The grandfather who cuts corners to build his first factory teaches his son that rules are for other people. The son who learns to manipulate tax codes teaches his children that wealth is more important than ethics. And those perfect children in their designer clothes, the ones being groomed for greatness, are really being taught that other people's suffering is an acceptable price for their success. The Ashford children are growing up now in very different circumstances. Their parents are serving prison sentences. Their trust funds have been seized to pay restitution to workers. They attend regular public schools and live with an aunt who works as a teacher. Maybe they will learn different lessons than their parents intended to teach them. Maybe they will understand that real success cannot be built on other people's pain. Or maybe they will grow up bitter and angry, believing they were victims of a cruel system that punished their family for doing what everyone does. That photograph still circulates on social media, the one with the red arrow pointing at Victoria. People use it as a cautionary tale, a symbol of hidden corruption, a reminder to look beneath the surface of perfect images. But Sarah, when she sees it, thinks about something else entirely. She thinks about how easy it is to be dazzled by wealth, how desperate we all are to believe in fairy tales about hardworking families who earn their success through merit alone. She thinks about how the myth of the self-made billionaire depends on millions of people never questioning where the money actually comes from. The reality is that behind almost every vast family fortune, there are workers who were underpaid, communities that were exploited, rules that were bent or broken, and a carefully constructed image designed to make you look away from the uncomfortable questions. The Ashfords were not unique. They were simply the ones who got caught. And that, more than anything else, is the truth that should keep you awake at night. Because for every empire that falls, dozens more stand gleaming in the sunlight, waiting for someone brave enough or foolish enough to point at them with a red arrow and say, "Look closer, see what you're supposed to ignore, understand that perfection is always, always a lie."